You know what the best part is about the recent college football expansion of Texas, Oklahoma going to the SEC, UCLA, Oregon, USC, Washington going to the Big Ten? We now no longer have divisions in college football. We now have two super conferences between the Big Ten and the SEC. And we are now getting what might be, besides Georgia and Texas a little bit later on this season, I think an understatement may be the biggest college football regular season game potentially of all time, at least in the SEC conference. Number two, Georgia. Number four, Alabama. These two rivals that used to match up obviously yearly in the SEC championship game now may no longer be the case because we don't have divisions in college football. Now we don't have cupcakes throughout the entire schedule. Now we have cupcakes for just a few of them. You have Kalen DeVore, the former head coach at Washington, taking over for Coach Nick Saban at Alabama. Still led by quarterback Jalen Milroe, who reminds me a little bit of Lamar Jackson. I think he may be actually a little more mobile, not as good in the pocket as Lamar was. But you have an Alabama team that decimated Wisconsin a couple weeks ago in Badger City. Now they come home for, like I said, maybe in Tuscaloosa, maybe the biggest college football game in that stadium's history. You could have made an argument for Texas last year when Quinn Ewers came in, but I think you can also make a strong argument. This is the biggest regular season game in the history of that stadium in Tuscaloosa. On the Georgia side, we know Kirby Smart, obviously former Nick Saban assistant. Now, Georgia has lost a ton of talent, not only on the defense side of the ball, but obviously on the offensive side as well. I'm not in love with Carson Beck at quarterback. I think losing Brock Bowers at tight end has been a big blow to that program. And the fact that they barely survived against Kentucky, a couple weeks ago, I think opened up a few people's eyes. I think this is going to be a very physical, very competitive game. Now, the interesting thing is, as I've talked about before, if we were still in the four-team college football playoff format, you could make the argument the loser of this game, because this year in college football, we have Missouri, we have Tennessee, we have Ohio State, we have probably Oregon, you have Georgia, you have Bama, you have Texas. I think those are probably, and Ole Miss is probably in there. Six or seven SEC schools, two or three Big Ten schools. Those are really the eight out of the 12 that I believe could win the national championship. There's really, five legitimate ones. And then if you get the right matchup, probably the last three. But in the old college football format between Georgia and Alabama, this game may have decided who goes to the college football playoff, who stayed home. We know last year, I thought Georgia was still a top four team in the country. I thought that they were better than Florida State. But nonetheless, here we are. And this year, I don't feel the same about Georgia. I don't think they're the dominant, back-to-back national champion. I think last year they started to show some sign of regression. I do think under Kalen DeVore in Alabama, their defense may not be as good, obviously, as it was under Coach Nick, but their defense hadn't been that good the prior years before that. I do think there's a little bit more of a focus on airing the football out, being more offensive centric, putting the ball in Jalen Milroe's hands. But this game will come down to who is going to be more physical. And again, I think Alabama is amped up. And I think the advantage that Bama has for this game is, again, it's not a Nick Saban team. Kirby Smart does not have, in my opinion, the defensive talent that he had a few years ago. I think Kalen DeVore is going to come out with some more tricks. I think Alabama is more motivated because this game means more to me for Alabama. They got a tough schedule coming up. You got Missouri, you got Tennessee, you got their arch rival LSU, which you can make an argument at this point. Bama may have a bigger rivalry with Georgia than LSU, but you got all that in there. Listen, Georgia's still going to be a very good team. I think both these teams are going to make the college football playoff. I think it's a low scoring 17-14, 2017 type game. I don't think there's going to be a lot of fireworks. I think it's going to be a feeling out process. In the end, I think Jalen Milroe is more of a playmaker than Carson Beck. That will be the difference in this game. I think Milroe gets Bama in field goal position. How lucky are we that for one of the first times ever, we get Georgia, Alabama this early in the season, September 28th, primetime game, SEC on ABC. We got Georgia, Texas coming up in a couple weeks. You got Alabama, Tennessee coming up in a couple of weeks. You got the Ohio State Oregon matchup coming up in a couple of weeks. I think that's on the same day as Georgia, Texas. So absolutely phenomenal. This is what college football wanted with a recent expansion of the two conferences. I love the fact they got rid of divisions. Let's let the two best teams decide it out. And again, could this decide who goes to the SEC championship game? Very well could be. And I would not be mad at all if Georgia and Alabama played a 7-game series, if you will, if they met again in the SEC championship game, because every time these two match up, it's physical. And even though, again, there's a new head coach on the sideline for Tuscaloosa, these two teams, in my opinion, are very evenly matched. I would not be surprised if they do play again if the winner of this game falls in the second game. Like that clip from the Brand Sports Podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brand Sports Podcast right here on YouTube.